necessarily reflect the views of all of the committee members, but we are here today as Natural Resource Committee Democrats to come together on a really urgent and important issue. I'm Seth Magaziner from Rhode Island, joined by a number of colleagues who will introduce themselves shortly, and I want to start by thanking for his leadership our Democratic ranking member, Jared Huffman, who is ominously behind me on the screen to make sure that I don't screw up too badly in his absence. So today's conversation is an important discussion on the reckless attacks by the Trump-Musk administration on the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, a science agency whose fundamental objective is to keep Americans safe and our economy strong. I want to acknowledge all of the NOAA partners and employees who are in the room today, and particularly I understand we are joined by several recent NOAA staffers who have been unfairly and likely illegally caught up in the Trump-Musk terminations at NOAA. I want to thank you for your service to our country and our planet, and just express on behalf of NRC Democrats our outrage at the way that your commitment to public service has been treated by this administration. NOAA's work is crucial to protecting and understanding our oceans, coasts, and atmospheres. NOAA provides vital services from weather forecasting and climate monitoring to fisheries management and coastal resilience. NOAA is an economic engine for fishing, tourism, and agriculture, and industries that depend on reliable weather and climate data. Fishermen rely on accurate weather predictions to safely navigate our waters. The tourism industry, which thrives in coastal communities, depends on NOAA's data to ensure safe beaches and healthy ecosystems. Farmers rely on NOAA's climate models to make informed decisions that affect their crops and livelihoods. And NOAA's role expands beyond the economy. It is also critical to national security. The U.S. military depends on NOAA's oceanographic and atmospheric data for mission planning, maritime operations, and disaster response. Weakening NOAA means weakening our ability to anticipate and respond to emerging security threats. So these critical functions are being dismantled by the sweeping, indiscriminate layoffs of nonpartisan public servants and facility closures. Park rangers, firefighters, scientists, all of these people whose purpose is to serve their fellow Americans have had the rug pulled out from under them. The assertion that mass layoffs will somehow improve efficiency is not only misleading, it is outright dangerous. Real people, real jobs, and real lives are on the line. Without NOAA's real-time data, emergency responders are left without the critical information they need to respond to impending disasters like wildfires, hurricanes, floods, and severe storms, putting millions at risk. There are 34 offices that will be impacted by the planned facility closures located across 17 states and territories. So the consequences of these closures will be far-reaching, well beyond Washington, D.C. In my home state, in my district, in Rhode Island, the National Marine Fisheries Service office in Narragansett is slated for closure by September, which will disrupt stock assessments of protected and commercial fish species. In the face of extreme weather and climate change, the stakes have never been higher. The health of our oceans, the safety of our families, national security, and the vitality of our economy depend on NOAA. We cannot allow this purge to go unchallenged. We, as Natural Resources Committee Democrats, have sent letters to NOAA asking for more information and a briefing. We have urged Chairman Westerman to conduct bipartisan oversight. We have proposed amendments to legislation so that our committee's oversight plan would include an understanding of the impact of the gutting of NOAA. So far, Republicans in Congress and the administration have refused all of our requests. So we are holding this forum today to continue fighting back in the halls of Congress and in the court of public opinion. We must outline a path forward that prioritizes investments in NOAA and holds Elon Musk, President Trump, and the architects of Project 2025 accountable for putting American safety and livelihoods at risk. We must ensure a resilient future for our communities and our environment, and I'm grateful for our expert panelists for their willingness to engage in this discussion today. With that, I would like to introduce our panelists, invite them each to provide a few opening remarks, and then I'll invite my colleagues here to offer their comments and to ask questions of our witnesses as well. Our first panelist is Ms. Mars Gutierrez-Graudich, the founder and director of Azul. Our next panelist is Ms. Mary Glacken, the former Deputy Undersecretary for Operations at NOAA, the weather company, and a former American Meteorological Society president. We are also joined by Rear Admiral John White, the former president and CEO of the Consortium for Ocean Leadership, former superintendent of the Naval Observatory and former oceanographer of the Navy, Ms. Sarah Schumann, a commercial fisher in Rhode Island and Alaska, and the director of the Fishery-Friendly Climate Action Campaign, and Ms. Elizabeth Lewis, senior associate attorney for Eubanks and Associates, representing NOAA employees who are members of the organization Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. So why don't we just go down the line in order here, and I'll ask each of our experts to offer some remarks, starting with Ms. Gutierrez-Graudich.
There you go. All right. Thank you, Ranking Member Huffman and other members here today for the opportunity to speak at this forum on the current attacks facing NOAA from the Trump administration and DOGE. My name is Marcela Gutierrez-Graudich, and I'm the founder and executive director of Azul, which is an initiative that works to bring the long overlooked voices of Latino communities to conversations about protecting our coast, our oceans, and our vast marine resources. As someone that began their career in the commercial fishing industry, I understand firsthand the importance of a healthy ocean communities, especially communities near the coast, where 40% of Americans live. And in order to have a healthy ocean, you need a strong NOAA. We know the existential threat of climate change disproportionately impacts communities of color. A majority of Latino communities live in California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Puerto Rico. All areas considered to be most at risk for extreme weather, like excessive flooding, air pollution, and heat waves. And I am sure other panelists will highlight this, rightfully so, that the mass illegal firings of NOAA employees and severe budget cuts will be devastating to the Weather Service, to life-saving weather alert systems for catastrophic storms, and to commercial fisheries across the country. The cuts are reckless, and they will put our lives and our livelihoods directly in harm's way. We have no idea how NOAA will keep functioning with these budget cuts. We have no idea how much expertise and knowledge has been lost in these firings. We have no idea what else the Trump administration will do to destroy NOAA. And we have no idea who else is slated to be let go. But the impacts will be far-reaching for all communities in the United States, especially Latino communities. A critical tool that NOAA provides for communities is the Digital Coast, which offers data, tools, and training to help communities respond to issues like coastal flooding and storm surges. NOAA has a catalog of over 100 stories about how this resource has helped communities all over the country. To name just a few examples, Digital Coast helped Florida use high-level surface mapping to improve their flood vulnerability assessments. It helped Southern California collaborate on innovation projects for their new blue economy. It helped Northern Mariana Islands better prepare for tsunamis. It helped improve storm surge modeling for Caribbean disaster preparedness programs, helped inform watershed management in Florida. It helped promote ecotourism in Virginia through watershed conservation. It helped analyze urban growth and flood risk in North Carolina, and helped lower flood insurance premiums in South Carolina. The list could go on and on. NOAA's tools have helped every one of these communities and so many more. So what will happen when there's no longer the budget for these tools, for the scientists, and the data experts who know how to use them? The unfortunate result is that big communities will suffer across the U.S. Thank you.
I also want to thank the members who are here today, Congressman Huffman, for doing this, such an important meeting. In my last job in the Navy, I was the oceanographer and navigator of the Navy. Just as importantly, I was the Navy deputy to NOAA. That's how important the Navy sees this relationship between our Navy and NOAA, and that they assign an admiral to be a deputy to the director of NOAA. They make sure there's a captain, a U.S. Navy captain, who's assigned full-time to work with that actual partnership. NOAA likewise provides a senior officer on the staff of the oceanographer of the Navy. It's critically important because this is an integrated partnership to ensure that the data information that is coming to our forces, both at home and deployed, is the best on the planet. It's critical for safety and effectiveness of the operations, especially at sea. For decades, this partnership has been recognized and has provided us with a home field advantage at the away games and at the home games. The Navy largely being the away team and NOAA being the home team. That partnership means it's one team. You can look at some of the history. Admiral Watkins, former Chief of Naval Operations and former Secretary of Energy, said that our knowledge of oceanography was key to our victory in the Cold War. You can go back further, 2,500 years, to Sun Tzu, a famous Chinese military strategist, who said that if you know the ground and you know the weather, your victory will be total. And the ground includes that part that's under the ocean, by the way. Military leaders well understand the importance of environmental information toward our national security, and it's why they put such a priority on that and why they've been doing it for years. And then look at some of the leaders at NOAA over time. Look at people such as Admiral Rottenbacher, people such as Kathy Sullivan. She was a reserved captain oceanographer in the U.S. Navy. Look at Rick Spinrad, who started his career and spent many years in the U.S. Navy working in oceanography. I worked for him back at the turn of the century. And even in recent years with Admiral Gallaudet. So you can see the partnership is so critical that we have a lot of former naval oceanography leaders who've been critically part of NOAA as well. So operational advantage, safety of forces around the world is critical, and it relies on the information from NOAA and the integration of what NOAA does, Navy does, Air Force does. Without the NOAA information, without leading the world in this, then our national security and the safety of our men and women in uniform is at risk. Climate change. We still have issues right now understanding what the impact's going to be on infrastructure, what the impact is going to be in the Arctic, where we know Russia and China are in a very heated competition with other nations. And we also need to understand what's going on with our bases, especially our coastal ones, looking at Annapolis, looking at a lot of places that are at risk, Norfolk being the largest Navy base actually on the planet right now, and what are the risks there. Then we have the international partnerships. In coalition operations, the U.S., Navy, and NOAA working together lead the world in terms of providing that critical environmental information. What's going to happen? We don't know, but I know it's not going to be good based on the current trend. And it worries me a lot because I just know that there are men and women in uniform out there who rely on this information. There are parents and husbands and wives who rely on having the best information possible to keep their loved ones safe and to make sure that we maintain our national security and that home and away game advantage for years to come. And I just don't know how that's going to turn out based on the current trend, and I lose sleep every night. Thank you.
I also want to thank the committee for convening this panel. I am a former Knaus Fellow, for those of you who are familiar with that fellowship program, and I actually teach ocean law and policy at Washington College of Law, so I'm well familiar with NOAA's importance. Through its operations and research, NOAA touches the lives of all Americans and affects nearly every sector of the economy. However, NOAA remains significantly underfunded and understaffed, given the requirements to meet its mission of protecting life and property and enhancing the economy. As my Knaus supervisor and friend and mentor who's in the audience here today, Craig McLean, told Congress 4 years ago, NOAA is a $12 billion agency on a $5.5 billion budget. Yet DOGE and the Trump administration officials in the Commerce Department and NOAA are working to exacerbate this problem by implementing the first in a series of RIFs, reductions in workforce, aimed to reduce NOAA's workforce by 20%. These officials are also micromanaging essential agency functions and restricting staff communications, including with lawmakers. To be clear, the administration's interference has done nothing to improve efficiency or evolve NOAA's services to the nation. Rather, workforce reductions are being pursued aggressively without any apparent strategy or long-term vision for the future of the agency. And the consequences for the American people are dire. For example, staff reductions at the National Geodetic Survey have put the National Spatial Reference System, which is the foundation of all geospatial activities in the United States, at risk. Staff cuts and regulatory freezes have also stalled the opening and closing of fishing seasons, leading to serious economic and environmental impacts. In fact, because of the regulatory freeze, the bluefin tuna fishery was not closed on schedule, and it was overfished by 125%. Days at sea for NOAA ships have also been reduced by up to 25%, impairing the collection of data that support regulatory functions. Remaining NOAA staff are launching Herculean efforts to keep vital products, services, and data online. However, if and when a RIF is implemented and the workforce is further reduced, the challenges of maintaining even minimal functionality may become insurmountable. Meanwhile, Commerce Secretary Lutnick, who oversees an $11 billion budget, is spending his executive time reviewing every single one of NOAA's contracts over $100,000. This extreme micromanagement almost came to a head on Monday when, as severe storms blew through much of the Mid-Atlantic, including D.C., the contract for the high-performance computing systems that support the Advanced Weather Interactive Processing System, or AWIPS, came within hours of lapsing. Even a temporary lapse could have delayed the delivery of satellite and observational data to Weather Service offices, jeopardizing the timely issuance of life-saving weather alerts. And just yesterday, I was informed the Chief Information Officer was told to cut all IT contracts by 50%. Such indiscriminate cuts and blind targets literally endanger lives. And I would be remiss if I did not also highlight the far-reaching human impacts of the administration's attacks. Agency staff at every level have been demoralized and marginalized. When coupled with cuts to grants and fellowships and increased job insecurity, we are at a serious risk of alienating the next generation of scientists, policymakers, and leaders who would help the United States weather future storms. So far from efficiency, the Trump administration's efforts to dismantle NOAA have only sowed chaos, bred a culture of fear, and compromised the agency's mission. NOAA simply cannot carry out its critical functions on limited staff, shrinking budgets, and aging equipment. Therefore, there's no doubt that if the administration's vision for NOAA becomes reality, American businesses will suffer, and even more tragically, lives will be lost. Congress must do more to protect NOAA before it suffers a literal death by 1,000 cuts. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Schumann. I earned my living as a deckhand in the Rhode Island bluefish, scup, and sea bass fishery and the Bristol Bay, Alaska salmon fishery. I work for two of the many thousands of small businesses across our coast that bring U.S. seafood ashore to feed people across our nation and beyond. I've always believed that earning the title of commercial fisherman means more than just fishing. It also means standing up for the ecosystems that support our fisheries and the communities who depend on them. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that here today. In 2022, I had the honor of being appointed to serve on the Marine Fisheries Advisory Committee, MAFAC for short, that advises NOAA and the Department of Commerce on the management of living marine resources. It was a volunteer role that I shared with 20 other expert stakeholders from across commercial fisheries, recreational fisheries, tribes, the seafood industry, academia, and the conservation community. But on February 28th, Secretary Lutnick, acting on orders from the White House or Elon Musk, informed all 20 members that MAFAC had been disbanded and the committee's operations terminated for good because it had, quote, served its purpose. MAFAC was not the only FACA committee that gave fishermen and their representatives a direct line into federal agencies that govern our livelihoods that has been terminated by the Trump administration. The National Commercial Fishing Safety Advisory Committee advising the Coast Guard and the Marine and Coastal Area-Based Management Committee were also terminated. I had friends from the fishing industry on both committees, and their expertise and innovative thinking that they brought to those roles has also now been lost. I want to be clear that I wasn't serving on MAFAC to defend the status quo, and I'm not here today to defend a status quo either. Like many in the U.S. commercial fishing industry, I want change. Having met with hundreds of fishermen across 14 states over the last decade, I have a pretty good idea of some of the changes that the fishing industry needs. Changes that include faster, more collaborative data collection and decision-making that keep up with changing ocean conditions. Greater attention to understanding and addressing the multitude of stressors affecting fishery habitats from upland, coastal, and ocean development. And a solid pipeline for young people to enter and thrive in fishing careers. I was on MAFAC to work towards that change. In the days immediately following November's election, a series of op-eds proclaimed the results as some sort of manifestation of a working class uprising. Now, I cherish the idea of working class leadership, and for a brief moment, I hoped that those op-eds were somehow right and that those voters saw some kind of promise in our newly re-elected president that I just failed to grasp. The hope was buoyed for a brief moment on January 20th when the administration took an action that the fishing industry had been asking for years, when they paused new leases for offshore wind development and called for a thorough review of the leasing process to be more responsive to the needs of ocean ecosystems and dependent communities. A sincere and science-based review is urgently needed as a counterbalance to the last administration's hyper-accelerated approach to offshore wind, which left communities in the dust and seemed to place the profit-making imperatives of foreign energy corporations above the needs and concerns of everyday Americans. And I felt like I needed to say that because the rest of what I say today is going to totally slam the administration. But that seemed to be sort of a coincidental alignment of the president's personal grievances and the community's needs, which has not been borne out beyond that one single event. In the 2 months since, the administration has abdicated its citizen-granted authorities to Elon Musk, the wealthiest man on the planet, and this unelected, unaccountable billionaire has torn through agency after agency, destroying a public service infrastructure that took decades to build. And it's clear that everyday Americans are not this administration's priority. It's clear that any avenue for working class empowerment in the context of the present administration is a complete chimera. I have a lot more to say about how the impacts of these actions are being felt on working waterfronts around the country, but I'm going to have to wait until one of you asks me to describe them because I don't want to take up Mary's time. But what I will say in closing is that all of the ambitious and visionary things that fishermen desperately need, the faster, more collaborative data collection and decision-making, the greater attention to the multitude of stressors affecting fishery habitats, the supports for young people to enter and thrive in fishing careers, will be vastly more difficult to achieve with a diminished and distressed NOAA workforce. How can NOAA and other agencies possibly ever solidify and sustain the kind of partnership with working people in coastal communities that is so urgently needed when the agency is being terrorized by oligarchs and their minions who've never done an honest day's work in their lives?
Thank you. I want to also thank the committee for calling this discussion, and I think you've kind of heard here. I have a small job at the end, I think, to kind of bring this together. So to recap, I'm Mary Glack, and I spent 35 years at NOAA, and when I retired, I was the senior most career person at NOAA. I did 5 years between the George W. Bush administration and the Obama administration, and I've never seen anything like this. My comments are also going to be informed by the 5 years I spent in the private sector. I worked for the weather company, and there is no weather forecast that's produced in this country that isn't dependent on NOAA, none. And I've also spent years now at advisory boards, both at the Academy, and I'm co-chairing the congressionally mandated Ocean Resource Policy Committee, advising the OPC should they ever meet again. But really, I decided today I was going to focus my thoughts. I'm currently a citizen in Jacksonville, Florida, and I wanted to kind of bring it down to that state level and what all of this means, because the chaos is so extensive. I will tell you, and I'm heartened by this, that our papers are filled with concerns about the cuts they're seeing across the government, and well, they should be, because of how they will impact a state like Florida. First of all, we have a huge physical footprint of NOAA in Florida, starting with the Hurricane Center, 5 forecast offices. We have marine sanctuaries, we have NEARS programs there, and of course coastal zone management. And I'm not even touching, we have aircraft operations going out of Destin, Florida as well. So there's a lot at risk here, and the fisheries, and thank you, Sarah, for really cutting into the fisheries. It's never an easy day to work in fisheries, but there's no possibility of working with the chaos that's happening right now to improve things moving forward, because I think Florida would like to see that as well. I still hear about red snapper in my dreams. So I just thought I would highlight just a little bit here to give you some numbers. So in our state, we have 5.3 million acres of submerged lands that are managed through NOAA programs. And this is a combination of the estuarine research reserves, the Coral Reef Conservation Project, the sanctuary that's there, and coastal zone management. And why is this important to us? Well, I've mentioned fisheries already, which is a tens of millions of dollars, $100 million industry there, more than that. But also we're very focused on this in terms of protecting our state's waterways and enhancing coastal resilience. So these areas safeguard water quality, buffer against storms and flooding, and provide critical habitat for fisheries and wildlife that drive tourism and recreation, one of the prime economic drivers in Florida. So they see over 100 million visitors annually for these world-class recreation activities. And without these programs, we are going to see increased pollution. Make no mistake about that. Regulations are needed in this regard: flooding, erosion, and habitat loss. So in Florida, we don't talk about climate change. It's really just not encouraged at all in the state. However, we talk about resilience all of the time. So in the prior Republican administration in Jacksonville, Florida, which covers all of Duval County, they started a resilience program there, really a hue and cry from businesses and homeowners because of the flooding problems we've had. They built a resilience plan that we're now in the third year of implementing. That is 100% dependent on NOAA data. That plan could not have been built without that, and they continue to upgrade and change things, whether they're concerned about the river forecasts on the St. Johns River or coastal floodings coming in. So I'll stop there, even though I didn't mention hurricanes, and, well, maybe I just will mention at the end. Well, I think that, again, I wear a weather hat going a long way back. This could not be a worse time of year for what's happening. This could not be a worse time of year. We have the severe weather, as was mentioned earlier, coming across. We haven't seen our first hurricane yet, but I guarantee you it's coming. And right now, I fear that the only thing keeping us from real disaster is the heroic efforts of NOAA staff. Thank you.
So we'll now move to members for questions that they have of the witnesses. And I understand that Ms. Elfreth has another commitment. So without objection, we'll let her squeeze a question or two in first.
Thank you very much, Representative Magaziner, and thank you to the panel for being here. And Mary, I couldn't agree with you more. Representing Annapolis and Maryland, whether we call it climate change or sea level rise, nuisance flooding, whatever it is happening, it's happening at an increased level. And just like Florida, my home state is incredibly vulnerable to the impacts of an unpredictable weather. I also want to take a moment, because I think I might represent a few folks in this room. NOAA staff, please know that the House Democrats, thank you for your service. We understand what you deliver for the American people every single day, and I apologize that you are not receiving the respect that you deserve. So please just know that we are with you. I do want to hone in on a couple of pieces, because I think what's really difficult at this moment in time with the flooding of the zone strategy from this White House, it's often hard for us to prove a negative. It's hard for us to tell our constituents the services they are used to, many of us were born with, and we pay taxes to support. What happens when they suddenly disappear? And we've heard from this White House that this is about efficiency. We've heard that most of these functions can move to the private sector. I'm going to ask you to just help us message this, because we are all policy wonks around this table. It's why we chose the Natural Resources Committee, frankly. But if you could help us message and help prove that negative, and I'm specifically looking at the Rear Admiral, I couldn't agree with you more from a national security perspective. the loss of NOAA would be devastating to so many of our installations and the people who are here to protect us. Can you just tell us, with the privatization of, say, the Weather Service or privatization of other functions of NOAA, what's the worst thing that can reasonably happen for our communities? And help us message this a little better.
So the worst thing that can happen, again, is looking at loss of life or loss in terms of warfighting advantage in some type of conflict going forward. Again, I look at our success, whether it's Navy SEALs going ashore on beaches, whether it's submarines that are transiting. And remember, we've had a submarine that has run into a seamount in 2021 with the USS Connecticut, and in 2005, the San Francisco. They were not well charted. It was understood. The Navy and NOAA, again, chart the oceans of the world with allies, but they're responsible for that. So the worst thing that can happen is that, one, we have loss of life because the data that we're relying on all of a sudden has been slowed down or stopped. There are critical contracts that were talked about that we rely on to improve data processing, to get that data to the users to understand where you're going, what's happening with the weather. It doesn't make it to the end user and something happens. Or we also look at other things that could happen in terms of, like you said, our coastal communities. Hurricane forecasting and typhoon forecasting rely on the data from NOAA, whether it's satellite data, it's ocean obs, it's ship observations, whatever it may be. Reductions in that data and that information provide critical threats to our military infrastructure. Ships that sort out of Norfolk and San Diego rely on that information about upcoming storms, especially hurricanes on the East Coast. What if in Jacksonville they don't get it in time to make the right decision to sortie the ships out of Mayport? It's not just billions of dollars of ship damage, it's lives that are at stake. So these type of decisions, these are the things that I'm worried about because these are the worst things that can happen. And I'll just say one more point. What happens if we go to war with China in the Western Pacific? We don't have that home field advantage anymore right now in certain parts of it. We lose that, then I don't need to tell you what could happen. What's the worst thing that could happen in a potential conflict around the island of Taiwan or some other place in that part of the world? Thank you.
I think if I could just comment on that quickly from the weather point of view, NOAA is operating billions of dollars worth of satellites and the high-performance infrastructure. I have no idea what the plan is. Are we going to have a fire sale for them and give them out, and then you buy some services like a warning? It makes no sense, and we've actually had that to the point where the private weather companies are worried about it going this way, because what's going to happen is there's going to be a big winner that'll create a monopoly. And one of the beauties of the system that we've had is you can start a weather company in your garage, and that's how AccuWeather started. So, you know, you're pushing more to billionaires.
All right, I'm going to recognize myself for a couple questions, and then we'll go back to sort of the regular order on the dais. And I'll start with Ms. Lewis. We're hearing that career-level senior staff may be reclassified as Schedule F, and can you just speak to the legality or illegality of that, and more broadly the legality of the staffing changes that the Trump-Musk administration are making at NOAA?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I do want to clarify real quick. I practice mostly environmental law, so I am somewhat familiar with these procedures, but the employment area is not necessarily my expertise. But I can tell you that the conversion to Schedule F, you have to satisfy several very specific criteria. I know that the Department of Commerce recently had a list of 6,000, which is almost half of NOAA's staff, 6,000 employees who allegedly could be converted to Schedule F. And when NOAA came back with a list of maybe a couple hundred, that list was rejected. And so really this is not about actually finding efficiencies or taking a look at what staffing levels are or understanding what staff actually does. This is about just looking for excuses to broad sale terminate everybody. And, as we know, the Schedule F has fewer workforce protections, and so that is, that's how they're going to try to go about just cutting the agency.
And so just to be clear, I mean, not just at NOAA, but across the federal government, these actions that the administration are taking are illegal, in our opinion. Also seems to be the opinion of a number of federal judges. And so
Yes.
Our Republican colleagues are now trying to pass legislation to tie the hands of the judges. The problem, of course, is not that the judges are wrong. The problem is that the administration keeps doing illegal stuff. And they're frustrated that they're being caught red-handed.
Absolutely. I mean, the topic of nationwide injunctions, I know, has been a hot-button issue in the legal community and in the halls of Congress for a while. But the fact remains, if you don't do illegal stuff, you won't get a nationwide injunction.
There you go.
So maybe you just comply with the law and do it right.
I have one more question, then I'll turn it over to our real ranking member here. I have to engage with our Rhode Islander here, so Ms. Schuman. I think it's fair to say we've got a great, robust commercial fishing industry in Rhode Island. I think it's fair to say that commercial fishermen have a love-hate relationship with the federal government. Can you just talk a little bit about, at a very specific level, what are the negative impacts of these staffing reductions and cuts to the everyday lives of commercial fishermen in Rhode Island and across the country?
Yeah, so I think within NOAA, Lizzie's already done a really good job of helping us understand how these cuts will bog down the agency's ability to serve the public. For fishermen, what that means is, at a time when we desperately need, because of climate change, we desperately need faster, more nimble, and more collaborative data collection and decision making. And there is very slim chance we're going to get that with this. What we need is actually not only what we had for the last 4 years, but a much more robustly funded NOAA and a much more robustly staffed NOAA that has the capacity to collaborate with communities who have bright ideas across the U.S. and to put those ideas into action. Beyond NOAA staffing issues, we've seen, we saw the temporary freezing of Maine Sea Grant funding after President Trump became enraged at Maine's Governor Janet Mills. And although funding was reinstated later, it left fishing communities across the country thinking about what would happen if the state Sea Grant offices that they depend on also became political footballs. Last week, news spread across the fishing industry that the budget line in the continuing resolution that would have set aside funds through the Saltonstall Kennedy Grant Program was zeroed out. Saltonstall Kennedy program derives from custom duties on imported seafood, and fishing industry members have long advocated that the entirety of these custom duties be set aside to support this program, which enables sort of bottom-up adaptation and innovation in seafood marketing by members of the seafood industry. Instead, too much of that funding has typically gone to backfill NOAA budgets that were too small. And it's a rare and coveted source of support for innovators in the seafood industry, and they will continue to advocate now for an increase over the $0 that the budget now has. And my friend Pete Granger in Bellingham, Washington, was one of the fishermen serving on the American Fisheries Advisory Committee that helped ensure that those dollars were going to where they could make the biggest difference for the resilience of the seafood industry. And he told me last week that he and his fellow committee members were told not to bother reading the proposals that NOAA had already received and not to bother showing up for the next meeting because there would be no funds to distribute. There are also rumors within the fishing industry that NOAA's fisheries finance program has been zeroed out, and that the committed funds from that loan program are now being clawed back. I have friends at the Commercial Fisheries Center of Rhode Island who were just beginning on a 3-year grant contract with the USDA to purchase 200,000 pounds of seafood from Rhode Island fishermen, including the boat I work on, and provide it to free for two Rhode Island families facing food insecurity. That grant had been awarded under USDA's Local Food Purchase Assistance Program, and they found out recently that that contract was being clawed back. My friend Robert Buckmeyer, who fishes in Bristol Bay, Alaska, spent the winter upgrading his vessel's refrigeration system with a grant from USDA's Rural Energy for America program. That funding has been in limbo for 2 months, and Robert is unsure whether he'll ever be reimbursed for the expenses he incurred on this project. The list goes on, but I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I'll now yield to and recognize our leader on the committee and thank him for bringing us together today, even from afar. Ranking Member Huffman.
Well, thank you, Representative Magaziner. Thanks for filling in today. Thanks to Vice Ranking Member Elfreth and to our other colleagues. And everyone, thanks for your indulgence for allowing me to appear by video. Thankfully, House Democrats believe in 21st century government, whether that is accepting the reality of climate change, defending the science and other critical work at NOAA, or helping congressional oversight work a little better using technology. And as we saw this week, even allowing parents of newborn babies to vote by proxy once in a while so they don't have to miss work. We like to operate in the 21st century. And that makes it very appropriate that we're talking today about the critical functions that NOAA provides. You've heard about how this lean and mean agency is so vital to all of our national interests, anything that touches the oceans, coasts, even the atmosphere, which is a lot. These things are being crippled by facility closures and sweeping indiscriminate layoffs of non-political, non-partisan expert civil servants who do this important work every day. So thank you so much to our witnesses for helping to spotlight these problems and challenges. I'm so distressed that Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick has bought into this destructive scorched earth agenda driven by Elon Musk and Russell Vought and Donald Trump. Instead of defending his agency's mission, our Secretary of Commerce is cheering on the ransacking of NOAA. And we know that over 800 workers were fired, but here's how we know what this is really all about. When courts stepped in to pause what are likely illegal firings, the administration was so determined to keep these people out of the office and off their jobs that instead of reinstating them, they put them on paid leave, meaning that they're still being paid. NOAA is getting all the chaos and dysfunction, but none of the savings that were supposedly the whole point that this was supposed to be about. So an additional 500 or so NOAA employees took this fork in the road offer, and the Department of Commerce plans now to carry out a reduction in force of over 1,000 employees. We are definitely talking about at least 10% of the NOAA workforce gone or on leave, and that is just devastating. So the assertion that this will somehow improve efficiency would really be laughable if it weren't so damn dangerous. The people who make it possible for NOAA to save lives and protect communities and support so much business and commerce every single day, these public servants are being vilified and dehumanized and treated like numbers. OMB Director Russ Vought, maybe the most powerful man in Washington right now, says he wants them to feel like villains, to feel so much trauma that they won't want to come to work, that they'll quit their jobs. This is not only deeply unfair and hurtful to these public servants and their families, it's going to hurt all of us because it is a virtual certainty that lives and livelihoods will be lost. And thanks to so many of you for helping to explain that, including you, Admiral, for talking about the vital national security interests at stake. Without NOAA's real-time data, emergency responders are left without critical information that they need to keep us safe, to respond to disasters like wildfires, hurricanes, floods, severe storms, all of it. It just puts millions of us at risk. And the 34 offices that are going to be impacted by the planned closures, these are located in 17 states and territories, which means the consequences of all this is going to be very far-reaching. And in my district alone, 2 National Marine Fisheries Service offices slated for closure by the end of the year, leaving an already data-limited fishery management system much closer to the brink of collapse. Now, this was all previewed for us. The authors of Project 2025 told us that they would attack science and dismantle NOAA if President Trump was reelected. Of course, he denied that this was his plan, but we are now all witnessing that the Trump administration is delivering exactly what Project 2025 promised, and in some cases even worse. So in the face of all of these threats, extreme weather and climate change, you just couldn't have higher stakes with the health of our oceans, the safety of our families, national security, the vitality of our economy, all depending very meaningfully on NOAA. That is the context for this conversation. Ms. Lewis, I want to go to you. You answered Representative Magaziner's question about Schedule F reclassification. I guess what I'm wondering, as we see all of these court rulings, and then the workarounds that the administration is then pivoting to in the face of rulings that are pointing out illegality in the way they've carried out some of these things. How long could all of this fighting over terminations and Schedule F reclassification, how long could it drag out? And what happens to workers who are caught in limbo? Right now, we are paying people to stay at home and be on administrative leave. Is it conceivable that something like that could happen to a significant number of those who are slated for termination? And if so, what does that mean for cost savings to the Treasury, and what does it mean for the ability of the agency to do its work?
Yeah, it's the picture of efficiency, right? In our experience, I've been doing federal litigation for about 10 years now, and these cases can drag on. It takes about a year for a case, but that doesn't include, any appeals. That's just the district court litigation. With appeals being bounced back up and down between the district court and the appeals court, I've seen cases last as long as 10 years. I don't think that'll happen, hopefully that won't happen here. But it is conceivable that, for the rest of this administration, for the next 4 years, these cases are playing out. And, as they're playing out, that employees continue to be on admin leave, which is, of course, devastating for our country. It is not at all cost savings, but it also really, you talk about trauma, wanting to work and wanting to do the job. NOAA has consistently been rated as one of the best federal agencies to work at. People generally spend their entire careers there. And it's because people love the work and they love the mission and they love the people. And being forced to stay at home, sure, you're getting paid, but it's isolating. And you are not able to do the work that you love. And for that to carry on for a year, 2 years, 4 years, it's the human impact. As you highlighted, cruelty is the point here. And that to me is especially devastating because NOAA also has an aging workforce. And we've seen NOAA try to protect its employees to a certain extent by meeting the demanded cuts through things like the early retirement and other measures. And so as these people, say, I'm not dealing with this, I'm just going to take retirement, you lose so much institutional knowledge. And that coupled with, again, the loss of grants. NOAA runs so many programs to get people from disadvantaged communities and disadvantaged populations into science, into meteorology, to make career paths for these communities. And, I know that's the forbidden DEI, but that is, how the agency fosters growth. And if those programs and contracts are terminated, plus the loss of institutional knowledge, plus the job insecurity, we are alienated. We are losing an entire generation of scientists and leaders who can help this country, we can keep its people safe, and can grow its economy. And that, to me, is the devastating human cost.
Yeah, I know that Project 2025 certainly called for this purge of employees, but it also called for and created these academies, these training academies, to train replacement personnel who would be MAGA loyalists. Are you seeing any sign of that moving forward?
Not quite yet. Right now we are in kind of the flood the zone, the randomness. The cuts are indiscriminate. They have done the keyword searches of the forbidden words to cancel contracts, but we imagine that once they reach the phase 2 rifts, it'll be much more targeted in that regard. I do know that we've seen retaliation in other agencies, and these are scientists for the most part. They just want to do their work, and it's very scary. And so the culture has gone from one of general support, just a quality federal agency to one of real fear. And I know people are really trying to hold the line, but it's getting much harder, especially as they feel the assault on all fronts.
Yeah. Thank you. Ms. Schuman, you talked about how important NOAA science is to the management of fisheries. And obviously people who make their living on water depend on that science in so many ways. Have we already seen examples of how the dysfunction of some of these arbitrary actions, including the freeze on any new regulations and all of this personnel action and the facility closures, is it already playing out in ways that are having detrimental impacts to the folks who make their living on the water? I'm hearing about bluefin tuna in New England, for example, but I suspect there are many other examples.
I'm not sure of any other examples right now, but I know we have sort of analogs with what happened during the pandemic when research vessels couldn't get out to collect the data that informs the stock assessments, and as a result, we're still in catch-up mode, and the science has been, off. And we saw this, I think, most starkly with the Bering Sea crab fishery in Alaska, that where the science was way off because as a combination of climate change and ocean acidification causing a stock collapse, but then the science didn't spot that stock collapse before it could be addressed and headed off. And I could just imagine us seeing, very similar things, across the board now with a lack of data collection and resulting in data poor fisheries, mismatched, seasons and regulations, and just
beyond even the data, the categorical regulatory freeze and things like that. I mean, you have to engage in all kinds of rulemaking continuously in order to manage federal marine fisheries, right? And isn't that going to create havoc?
Yeah, absolutely. It will.
I can speak to that if you would like. So I know that they, so as hopefully we all are aware, there's a 10-to-1 regulatory freeze right now. So for every 10 regulations, or every one regulation the agency wants to pass, 10 must be rescinded. You need a regulation to open a fishery. You need a regulation to close a fishery. During the first Trump administration, they accepted hunting and fishing regulations from this freeze. That has not happened this time. So right now, I mentioned the bluefin tuna earlier. New England fisheries are expected to open late, according to the New England Fishery Management Council. If everything stays the way it is, groundfish will miss the May 1st date. The scallop fishery may only partially open on April 1st. Cod and halibut only opened on time with intervention from Senator Murkowski, who personally had to call Secretary Lutnick and beg for the approval to issue the regulation to open the fishery. And what would have happened there, because that is a transboundary fishery, Canada would have gotten to it first, which would have really hurt American fishermen. Pacific salmon is also behind schedule. Although we don't know the full impact because the agency itself doesn't know of the firings, we are seeing reports that at least 5% of the workforce dealing with fisheries were probationary employees who are now on admin leave. So these people can't write the regulations. They can't do the science. Yeah. Days at sea have been reduced. They can't actually go out and catch the fish. So how do you expect this agency to actually sustainably manage our fisheries, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry and employs so many people and is so essential to communities, without this information and without these people?
That's what I was getting at. Thanks for jumping in. I mean, just to have a fishing season, just to set quotas, just to do the myriad things that you've got to do every single year in order to have well-managed fisheries. You've got to have a bunch of these personnel. They've got to know what they're doing, and they've got to be nimble. And now hundreds and hundreds of them are being laid off. So is it fair to assume that this is going to have a really destructive effect just on the operation of probably commercial and other fisheries around the country?
I think it's not only fair to assume, I think we can confidently say that it is happening.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks. And what about the seafood supply chain?
At the risk of getting myself in trouble, I've been told that we're running late. So
you got to cut off that wordy ranking member sometimes. I appreciate it. Thank you very much to the witnesses.
West Coast
I yield back.
here, Jared. But thank you very much. So we'll move on to other members now. And okay, We are we're joined by someone who's wearing two hats, not just as a longtime member of the Natural Resources Committee, but also as the ranking member of the DOGE Subcommittee on Oversight, trying to make some sense of all of this craziness and hold the administration to account. So, Rep. Stansberry, do you have any questions?
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. We have a packed house here in the room. I'm Melanie Stansberry. I'm proud to represent New Mexico's 1st Congressional District. And for those of you that are wondering why I would be attending a NOAA hearing or roundtable, it's because obviously NOAA plays a major part even in the landlocked parts of our country in terms of managing the Weather Service and advising us on climate issues. And I always like to try to understand what the administration is doing, in part by going to their own sources. And so as I was sitting here listening, I actually went on Elon Musk's own AI system to find out what's been cut most recently by the Trump administration. And according to Grok, which is the AI system that Elon Musk is set to go make a lot of money off of when he leaves in a couple of months or in a couple of weeks, over 1,000 NOAA employees have been fired or resigned, with plans to cut an additional 1,000, representing about 20% of the agency's workforce. Layoffs have included environmental modeling, critical for weather and climate prediction. As much as 25% of center staff have been cut. There's been a suspension of climate updates. They've targeted climate-related programs. Staff have been ordered to identify climate science and anything having to do with climate or clean energy. The Office of Ocean and Atmospheric Research has been particularly hard hit, with 32% cuts proposed. They're reducing data collection. Satellite and ocean observing programs have been cut. And the Trump administration, influenced by Project 2025 and DOGE, even his own AI system is blaming Elon Musk for all of this, is restricting scientists' communications, oversight, emails, and international collaborations, and it goes on and on. So not only are they not safe from our oversight, they're not safe from their own oversight by their own internet programs. So I really want to dig in a little bit about the impacts and the implications, and so I'm particularly glad that Deputy Undersecretary Glacken is with us here today. I'm a former Fed. I was a nonpartisan Fed in the Obama administration at the White House Office of Management and Budget, and I actually worked on earth science systems. I was in the Interior Branch, and I oversaw the funding and policy programs for USGS, for our Earth observing satellite programs, in partnership with NOAA's satellite programs and Earth Science program at NASA. And I oversaw all of the science and tribal programs for Department of Interior. And I think that what this administration does not seem to understand is that science is the foundation of how we understand the world, make predictions, and actually manage everything from the private sector to our responses to things like natural disasters and fires. And the thing that always gets me about this whole effort at DOGE is that I see Elon Musk and Donald Trump on TV every day basically claiming to have discovered the idea of making government more efficient. And, you know, having worked on these issues for many years inside of the administration, I can tell you that when I arrived at OMB in 2011, there were many government efficiency efforts underway at the time. The president had just signed an executive order on government waste. We were trying to make sure that we were shoring up programs. There was a proposal. Obama even presented it in a State of the Union of consolidating NOAA fisheries with Fish and Wildlife. But guess what? He came to Congress to get the authority to do that, and the Republicans would not give him the authority to do that. Right? So for them to come here and claim, oh, we're just trying to make the government more efficient and to streamline these programs is a bunch of BS, because administration after administration have been trying to do this. And the point that I have been trying to really bring to the forefront is that even these efforts to privatize these programs have been looked at many, many times. In fact, when I got to OMB, there had been decades of efforts to potentially privatize the Earth observing satellite programs at both Department of Interior and the Weather Service. And guess what? Administration after administration found out that the public interest and data usage of that data was so crucial that you could not turn it over to the private sector, because if it failed, there would be catastrophic impacts for everything, because it's the Weather Service, because we use that data for everything. So while I appreciate that Mr. Musk thinks that he's somehow going to discover what years of experts who've looked at these matters have not already looked at, it's very clear that at the end of the day, when he leaves in a few weeks or a couple of months, all he's going to leave in his wake is a gigantic mess of court cases, of fired staff, of the loss of scientists, and dismantled and partially dismantled government programs that will take years to restore, that has undermined our standing internationally, that has undermined our ability to even predict the weather, and that will have life or death consequences for people on the ground. And now they're talking about dismantling FEMA as well. So, I think my question that I'd like to ask you, Deputy Undersecretary, is, I know you retired a number of years ago from NOAA, but having managed the Weather Service, can you talk to us a little bit about why the Weather Service is a public good, why it needs to remain a public good, why it should not be privatized, and why what we're seeing this administration dismantling all of these agencies and these experts, the kind of long-term impacts you think that will have on these programs. And then I'll just add in there, I know this is a lot to keep track of, but while I was at OMB, they actually hired a private consulting firm. McKinsey was brought in to do a restructuring of the Weather Service just a few years ago. So I cannot comprehend why a dude with a bunch of 20-year-old software engineers thinks he can do better than the largest and most sophisticated, analysts in the world who just restructured the agency themselves couldn't do.
So thanks for that great question. I'll start with a little bit of Sarah's line. I'm not actually here to defend status quo. I think it's important, that you look. And one of the things that hasn't been mentioned here at all today, and I think it's important, I want to commend it to you, is public-private partnerships. And this is where I'm not talking about the big boy agencies coming in and taking over, but more things on like marine technology. Where we could do a better job on stock assessment. So we're also disenfranchising contractors across the government right now, and I worry about their workforces as well. But with respect to the National Weather Service, I think they have been moving ahead with impact-based forecasting and decision support services that are there. One of the things that might be a surprise to some people is the accuracy of there's been a growing gap between how accurate our warnings are and people's ability to respond to them. So you'll be in a cone of a hurricane, but if you're not on the right line, people kind of think they check out. They don't do that. Or they might have a tornado watch, but be thinking, well, that's not really me, or, something like that. So one of the things the Weather Service has been trying to do is bring more social science, which is probably also a bad word these days, into the mix, but we desperately need that. I think one of the things the National Weather Service is make sure everybody gets the message, so it's free and open to all. They do not there's no app on your phone, and they're completely dependent on the private sector to distribute their warnings and forecasts, and they do that because we have such a good cooperative relationship. We consider in the weather community, we call it the Weather, Water, and Climate Enterprise, and there's three major segments of it. It's the public sector, the private sector, and we also haven't talked about the academic sector here today, where we're also losing that pipeline that's coming in. So I think that the National Weather Service could benefit more, and I've actually testified on this, by working more closely with some private sector companies. The warnings still look like they were produced in the 1980s, and why doesn't it look like, why doesn't my flood warning look more like my tracking my Uber? So there are things. So, but this is not, to your point, it's chaos now. I think we have generational impacts, I'm sorry to say, and I fear for my grandson. But we have to bring this to stop. And, one of the things I'm trying to do is amp up the public discussion on this so people know how bad this is. We don't have, if we can stop it before we kill people, we'll be doing a service at this point.
Thank you, Secretary. And I could listen to Melanie tear Elon Musk to shreds all day, but I've done a terrible job keeping us on time. So I have to move to my friend and colleague from Oregon, who is the ranking member of the Water, Wildlife, and Fisheries Subcommittee that has oversight over a lot of NOAA's work, Representative Hoyle.
Thank you very much. So I represent Oregon's 4th Congressional District. That is 2/3 of the Oregon coast, 250 miles of one of the richest ocean ecosystems in the world. Also, some of the roughest ocean conditions in the United States, including Alaska. We have Oregon State Hatfield Marine Science Center that works very, very closely with NOAA on research that help our commercial fishing industry, and we have a very strong commercial fishing industry that relies on NOAA and the National Weather Service. For us, the National Weather Service is important not just because they do ocean mapping, which keeps our fishermen safe, and, weather reports that, again, make sure that people aren't dying when they go out to feed the world and our country, but also lets us know when we have wildfire danger, when the wind shifts, which it shifts very quickly from the cool, moist ocean air to the dry, hot east wind. And without that, we are not going to be able to prepare for wildfires or fight them as well. Either way, people will die. Our commercial fishing industry, as I said, it feeds our country and the world in very, very difficult conditions. Our fishing families are interwoven throughout every single part of our coastal communities, and every single loss of life is tragic. But when we lose one of our own, when we lose someone from our fishing community, everyone, all of us grieve, and grieve deeply. So, Ms. Schumann, I'd like you to just talk about being a commercial fisherman and knowing this industry. What does it mean to the safety of the people who feed our world when they don't get the kind of information that NOAA provides?
Yeah, we depend on that information. We depend on the weather forecast provided by NOAA. We depend on knowing that the Coast Guard is there when we need them. If either of those things is, our faith and certainty in either of those things is diminished at all, it creates a serious risk for life and limb and the future of the seafood industry.
Thank you. And then I think there are many examples about how, in an effort to sell off all of our government services to the highest bidder, and you're right, it's going to be just a blowout auction to sell all of this technology. The problem is we fired the people that know how to operate the technology. They fired the people that know how to operate our tsunami warning system on the West Coast. We live in a fault line. We have a buoy off the coast of Central Oregon that is part of our tsunami warning system. It's offline. We can't get any information. So, when you break this apart, it means that nothing will work, and nothing will work for a while if that infrastructure is broken. This is not the kind of thing where a company can just come in and take it over and keep it running, not with that level of expertise. So I want to point to one thing in Admiral White. So the marine carbon dioxide removal systems, China has just put in $100 million through the UN to do this work and innovation. They've invited us to participate, and this is a multi-billion-dollar industry opportunity that we are losing the innovation race and we are losing our scientists too. What does this mean to our national security when we give up this kind of technology advancement and research to countries like China and Russia? Where does it leave us?
It leaves us, if not equal to falling woefully behind in many of the areas of ocean technology. There are universities in every state, certainly every coastal state, that are involved in ocean tech. I would say you'd be hard put to find a coastal university that does not get research funding from NOAA, from the National Science Foundation, and the Office of Naval Research. The organization, the partnership to fund research to apply ocean tech in a synergistic means to the benefit of everyone, whether it's fisheries, whether it's safety, whether it's national security. And we've seen, studies were done, I was involved in one, to look at where the academic profiles of ocean technology research were going about 10 years ago. And it pointed to, and this is back when we were investing a lot, it pointed to about equal between us and China in many important areas such as underwater acoustics by the mid-20s. I think now what we're seeing is we're about equal in many areas, and we're going to fall woefully behind. We don't talk enough about the impact of those research cuts the R&D is going to have on these type of systems, whether it's blue carbon initiatives, whether it's ocean energy initiatives, or whether it's understanding the ocean and applying it to our national security, our military advantages. And yes, we are seeing this slip very, very quickly, especially looking again, the academic world has driven the innovation that has kept us safe and secure, the best managed fisheries on the planet, the safest coastal areas, the safest weather responses, including the nation that has almost all the tornadoes in the world, by the way, and a national security, a Navy, a Coast Guard, an Air Force, a Marine Corps who can rely on that technology to make us safety, more secure, and victorious in the future.
Right, thank you, Admiral. And I understand Ms. Brownlee has to run, so if you don't mind, then we'll...
I promise to be brief. I'm Julia Brownlee. I represent California's 26th district. I'm new to the committee. I was on the committee previously and got added this year, so I'm happy to be here. In my district, we have a naval base Ventura County, which is stationed right at the California's central coast. It suffers and very vulnerable to sea level rise. In my district, we've had two of the largest fires in California in its history until they weren't the largest fires in California's history. Recently, well, just about a year or so ago, in a very small part of my district, we had, from the atmospheric rivers that were going on, we had this tremendous amount of rainfall that actually had a lot of impact on our deepwater port that we have in our district that's associated with the naval base. But the National Weather Service told us after that its highest peak of rain, it was a 1 in 10,000 year rain event. So my district is adjacent to the Pacific Palisades for the Palisades fire, and I can tell you that not only all of the destruction that happened on land, we're very, very worried about our ocean and the toxins that are there, and I don't think we've even begun to get to the bottom of that and what the impacts are and what we need, what we will need to do. I will be brief, I promise, because I'll just ask one question, I promise. And it's to you, Admiral White, again. And it's sort of related, I think, to maybe Representative Hoyle's question. And that is, for the first time in 10 years, climate change has not been mentioned in the annual threat assessment conducted by the National Intelligence Council. So what does this omission mean in terms of climate threats?
It means that we have decided that we're willing to take extreme risks in terms of what's happening to the infrastructure of our military bases, both land-based and sea-based and coastal, that we're going to just ignore it. It means that we're not going to pay attention to the strategic type of implications of human geography in response to climate change, of droughts and fires in relation to overpopulation, food sources, water means. We have shown that we can do that and predict what's going to happen in many areas of the world. I guess we're not going to care anymore. It means that we are, not going to be really concerned about the risks of our military capabilities going forward that, again, rely on environmental knowledge and have for decades, if not centuries. We've kept the advantage and used knowledge of the environment going back to the Revolutionary War with George Washington coming ashore, not far from here, and understanding what's going on with the environment and using that to our advantage. We're basically saying, that's not that important anymore, I guess. But we all know different, and that's what really concerns me going forward. So we've got to make sure that, these interests are critical. Interest to your county, what's happening there. You talked about that Deepwater port. What happens if there's a storm and that port now is, that we're not sure we can get ships in or out? I've already heard that if we had to redo Francis Scott Key, we could not open it in the same manner of time that we did by NOAA's oceans, by their Office of Coast Survey, because of the cuts that have already been made to people and information. So what's going to happen in the future as we respond to these type of events? And we're not going to be able to do it. And I guess we've decided that risk is acceptable. I don't think it is. I don't think anybody here in this room does. And that's the message that we need to go forward with. Unacceptable risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you, and I keep my promise on being short, but would love to meet with all of you at some point in time and dig into this further. So
thank you, Rep. Brownlee, for your leadership, and thank you, Rep. Dexter, for your patience. You are recognized.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate everyone coming. I want to underline Representative Elfrett's gratitude for the NOAA employees who are here and for our committee running this, or the Democrats running this. I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, we all depend on NOAA. I think I'm not going to underline the things that many of my colleagues have already said, but I represent Oregon. I have the mountainous portion or part of the mountains of Oregon as well as agricultural areas. And so for coastal states like mine, like Representative Hoyle already talked about, NOAA is not a luxury. We've established that. It is a lifeline. And especially in the area of high winds, we've seen that trigger wildfires devastating to our communities across our state, tsunami warnings for our coastal communities, winter storms that took out infrastructure across my district. These are alerts just aren't information. They're critical safeguards for our community. And so among those wrongfully terminated was a National Weather Service tsunami program manager in the Pacific Northwest, someone whose expertise is vital for protecting families and communities from disaster. Losing that institutional knowledge, as many of you have already discussed, puts us all at increased risk. And without these public servants, we are really weakening our disaster preparedness, which is one of the hats as a critical care physician that I wear very proudly. So as ranking member of the Oversight Subcommittee, I demanded information from the Department of Commerce on Trump's plan to terminate at least 34 NOAA office leases nationwide, including 2 in my home state. And we never received a response. And that silence, I think, speaks volumes. So that's why we're here. We cannot sit back and let folks close our institutions that we rely on. So, Deputy Undersecretary, if Elon Musk succeeds in shuttering NOAA offices across the country, what does that mean for our community's ability to respond to natural disasters? And can you please paint a picture for us about the risks to public safety as we face intensifying wildfires, hurricanes, and rising sea levels without this information?
Yeah, I think that without this kind of information, emergency managers, funded at the state and local level, will be at the mercy of what they can find on internet or trying to interpret radars, if there are radars. See, what I really worry about is that observing backbone network there is run by those offices. Every tornado warning is backed up by a sighting on a radar. So, and we're already seeing part supply problem, because the secretary isn't there approving all these contracts. They didn't have stuff stockpiled forever, and all of that will catch up. So I think, I think we've said it here, and I've hesitated to say this in prior instances in my life, but lives are at risk. People will die from this, I'm sorry to say.
Thank you. And I want to underline the importance of our most marginalized communities in that situation. And I want to just elevate your voice and the communities that you represent. And if you'd like to share with us your perspective on how this would impact your community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I know that some words are not in vogue anymore, and we're not supposed to talk about diversity or anything like that, but the fact is that as a country, we are diverse by definition. We have it in our currency, e pluribus unum, from anyone. We have states that have a variety of ideas and cultures, et cetera, and so we can try to pretend that we are not a diverse place, a diverse country, but we are, and that is our strength, and we have to make sure that we have this engagement with all communities, with the most impacted communities, many of which are Latinx around the country. We talk about the impacts of hurricanes like Maria and Sandy, et cetera, years later, and I can't even imagine what it would be like to have to deal with those effects after the fact without the proper information now. And so right now, apparently there was a contract for translation of weather notices that just expired this week as well. And so as we're going into hurricane season, as we're going into this problems, how are we supposed to deal and rebuild and even plan for these issues? And so what is currently crony capitalism is going to turn into, disaster capitalism. And this completely fails, and really the hypocrisy, and we've talked about it before, about wanting to have things that are more efficient, that are more cost efficient, that are better for the economy. And the fact is that we are being, penny wise and pound foolish with this, dollar foolish with this, because we are, kneecapping these systems, we're kneecapping the relationships, the ability for more scientists to get into the field, the ability for scientists with other experiences, with other capacities, et cetera, to get in the field, which in turn really impacts us and improves all of our lives. So it's not just a one-way street. It's having known that we have all of these viewpoints, that are we better informed, that all of these communities are having a better picture in how we and how we're operating government. And so it's a sad thing long term about what could really be rebuilt after the fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dexter. And before we wrap up, I just have a follow-up question for Ms. Gutierrez-Graudic on that point. So I think it's always important that those who are making policy have the trust of those who their policies are impacting. And so can you just speak a little bit to the importance of having that trust and connectivity between NOAA and the communities that NOAA serves, and what the implications of this gutting of NOAA will be on that ability of communities that are impacted to trust the decisions that are being made?
Thank you, Representative. Long term, the problem is, and we have studies talking about how when communities don't feel like they're being they're getting the help and the resources from experts, especially in the environmental field and the environmental policy, they tend to no longer participate, and again, that leads to a loss for all of us. So there's a disenfranchisement of civic engagement. We were recently in your home state in Rhode Island having a roundtable with Latino communities there that have been very interested. We've gotten several invitations, and we wanted to have a roundtable about to discuss this. And what people wanted to talk about was how they could get more involved, for example, in the blue economy, for example, in STEM careers. And so we are talking about these cuts that are currently cutting. So I know that there's a cut to the NOAA Education Partnership Program. There are some of the programs that are actually creating those roadmaps, that creating those places those entry places for people to engage. And again, when we don't have those communities engaged, all of our communities engaged, we are missing out a big part of the picture, and we have an incomplete information set. And again, like we've heard from all of our folks, we need to have all the information that we can and we need, and that's where NOAA comes in. And again, cutting those problems will derail some of these engagement points, and more importantly, impact all of us.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you and all of our panelists for participating today. Thank my colleagues as well and all of the Natural Resources Committee Democrat staff that put this together, and all of you for being here. And I think if we can just sum up, the message that we want everyone to come away with is we have the backs not only of the devoted NOAA staff who have been unfairly caught up in Donald Trump and Elon Musk's reign of terror on science and on the ability of government to function, but we also have the backs of the people who you have devoted yourselves to serving. The fishermen, the farmers, the small businesses, the hospitality industry, the consumers, everyone who NOAA serves, and of course our national defense and our planet. And so we are in challenging times, no doubt, but I think what you saw here, the level of participation from members, Democratic members of the committee on a non-session day, when we don't even have votes or any full committee hearings, shows that we are very amped up about this. We are motivated. We have your backs. We are going to fight back, and ultimately, on behalf of the public, we will be successful in restoring NOAA to its rightful place and rightful mission. So I want to thank you all once again. Please stay engaged with us. So we went over by half an hour, and we didn't even begin to scratch the surface. But to our experts, but also to all of you who are watching, keep sending us ideas, keep sending us information. Let us know how we can best advocate for you. And with that, without objection, we will close today's proceedings. And thank you all very much again.
Oh, wow, they print out.